When we look at the whole story of the transmission of the oral law, the Mishnah and the Talmud were two incredibly important documents which in hindsight ensured the survival of the Jewish people. But it's important to keep in mind that ideally neither of these two documents should never have been created. We understand that in Judaism there's an oral law and a written law, just as in an academic environment. You don't walk into a classroom and the teacher says to you, glad you're here, here's the textbook, read it, I'll be back in 6 months for the final exam. Nor does a teacher walk in and say, no background readings or research to do here, just listen to me talk a couple of hours a week and you'll have the final test. True education is a combination of texts and interaction. So too in Judaism, we have the written law, which is Jewish worldview, which contains the basic values of Judaism. But the application of Judaism is based on the oral law. And ideally that oral law was never supposed to be written down. When you write something down, it's like set in stone. Jewish law is based not on precedent, but on principle. Those principles can always be applied. But once it's written down, it becomes a little more rigid. But we see that the writing down of first the Mishnah and then the Talmud were far from ideal. But in hindsight, they were two amazing creations which really saved the Jewish people. But both were done in a less than ideal situation. Yehuda Hanassi recognizing the Jewish people in a critical position, that soon central authority could disappear, that the break we have from Roman persecutions might not last, and that we might find ourselves scattered around the world with that oral tradition lost, because until that time it was teacher to student, from Moses down from generation to generation. And we know that if the oral law is lost, there's no Torah, and if there's no Torah, there's no Jewish people. So in a brilliant move, a prescient move, looking to the future, Yehuda Hanassi takes all of those different oral traditions and puts them together into the Mishnah, which is a cryptic codification of the oral law designed as a memory device. Something that wasn't supposed to be done, but was done to save the oral law. It's called violating one negative principle to save the entire thing. In hindsight, we see it was an act of pure genius to do such a thing. But we also see as we get further away in history, and as central authority does weaken, and as the Sanhedrin does cease to exist, and central authority in Israel does disappear, even that cryptic codification is no longer good enough. And the rabbis have to add in further commentary. It's sort of like looking at your notes after class. A few months after you finish the course, the notes make sense to you. But if you don't look at them for 10 years and look at them again, they make no sense. So too, the further we get away from the writing down of the Mishnah, the giving of the Torah, even that oral tradition becomes fuzzy around the edges, so the Talmud had to be invented. The Talmud is just a further elucidation of the Mishnah. So both were put into place as a stopgap measure to keep Torah from being forgotten, to ensure the survival of the Jewish people. And since that time, we've added more commentaries, the commentary of Rashi and the Balei Tosafot. And today we even have Art Scroll. But all of it, in hindsight, was part of this amazing process of preserving the oral law, of keeping it clear, of passing it on from generation to generation to ensure that the Jewish people would survive until the end of history.